Welcome to the Execution is King podcast, where we talk to successful startup founders, investors, and ecosystem builders to uncover insights and best practices for the next generation of great global startups. I'm your host, Joseph Siebert. Today we are featuring Mynul Khan, CEO of Field Nation, along with my co-host, Ryan Weber, partner at Great North Ventures. Ryan and Mynul, you guys go way back, don't you?
Yeah, Mynul and I were lab partners in computer science at St. Cloud State.
You and your brother invested in Mynul when he was just getting off the ground. Is that right?
Yeah, a few years after graduation, I heard from Mynul, and we were early investors, and I had a chance to follow Mynul's journey from an immigrant student through, becoming the leading, startup CEO for IT technician labor in the country as a gig economy service.
So that's a great thing about Mynul's story. And the reason we have him on today is because it really speaks to the possibility of great companies being able to be started anywhere. Nowadays, you don't have to be in a tech hub. You don't have to be in San Francisco. You can literally be anywhere and still make it happen.
So as some of the examples I'm excited to dig into with Mynul is, first of all, how do you get inspired in a central Minnesota smaller market to even consider doing a startup? And then, how do you develop a network to accumulate the resources needed to succeed, given such humble beginnings? And then how does that change as you're going through figuring out your new business to scaling the business, and what is it like? What challenges did you have to overcome throughout that journey?
Well, great. You and Mynul know each other so well. I'm going to stay out of this interview as much as I can and let you guys go at it.
So Mynul, we've known each other for over 20 years now. It's over half of our life, not just our adult life, pretty much our entire adult life. But I'm really excited. Longtime friend, and a great classmate and advisor to current projects that we're involved in. But maybe, Mynul, for the audience, you could start off by telling us a little bit about Field Nation and what you do.
So Field Nation is the simplest way to explain. It's like Uber for field services, right? What we do is we connect businesses that need field service work done with the technicians and engineers in the field who have that skill set to get that work done. So think about all these retail stores. They need point of sales to cabling to networking. All sorts of technologies getting deployed in retail, banking, QSR, quick serve restaurants, offices, and how do you find these technicians? How do you deploy them? How do you know that they're qualified? How do you manage the project? All of this is built into the Field Nation platform. We help businesses connect with the right technician in the right place and help them manage the whole project from the start of the planning all the way to payment, back office management, all that kind of stuff.
And when did you start Field Nation?
I started Field Nation in 2008. That was March of 2008.
I think the people would love to hear a little bit about your background, being from Bangladesh originally and coming to St. Cloud State University to study. Could you talk a little bit about, your background prior to Field Nation?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Bangladesh. I came here for college. For my bachelor's degree, I went to St. Cloud State. Usually when people hear that Bangladesh to St. Cloud, they immediately, the follow-up question is how you ended up in St. Cloud. And the answer is, when I was looking for colleges in the US, I learned that there is only one state that was at that time was at least offering in-state tuition to foreign students from day one. So the taxpayers were, graciously paying for part of the tuition for the foreign students. So as you can imagine, Bangladesh is literally the other side of US. It's literally 12 hours time difference. Growing up, I knew, Hollywood and New York and LA. Never heard about St. Cloud, probably not even Minnesota growing up, right? But then as I was doing my research, which college, and everything is expensive, especially when you come from the other side of the world, a developing country. uh, it's like, okay, I can't afford to go other places, and St. Cloud gives a great deal. And that was really the primary reason to come to St. Cloud State. But very quickly, I just I just loved everything. I just loved the school, the the teachers, the community, the friendship that I built. My original plan was I'll just do 2 semesters of general education courses and then go somewhere else. But then that never happened. I just really love this place and love the community, love the school, and decided to stay here. So right after college, well, actually, in the last semester of my college, I had the opportunity to do an internship with a startup called eBureau in St. Cloud. And I think I was probably the, I don't know, fourth or fifth employee at, at eBureau. And that's kind of where I really saw, got the sense of what it takes to build, and the fun of building and taking something to the market, the uncertainty. And I remember the first day I went to eBureau, they were in this big Quest building. There was no desk, there's no chairs and stuff like that. A couple of people were building product and stuff like that, and I just loved that. And so I never grew up thinking that I would have, I would start my own business, but I just loved the whole process there. And then I started the first company back in 2004 called Technician Marketplace. It's really first version of Field Nation. I started that in 2004, and that company also grew fairly quickly. But I ran into cash flow problem and had to shut it down. It took a year off, got married, and promised my wife not to start another company. That lasted a year. But of course, with her blessing, started Field Nation in 2008. So that's the whole story, Ryan, all the way
Nice.
from Bangladesh to Field Nation.
During these early years, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced with starting a business?
For me, the biggest challenge was that I didn't have a network, right? You need to know people to start a business, like people who can advise you, people that you can actually not even hire, but say, hey, would you work with me on this project? So my network, coming from Bangladesh, my network was really, really small. So that was one of the biggest challenge. Me being an immigrant had its own unique challenge, because I couldn't just leave my full-time job and do this thing, because that wouldn't be legal. So I always had to have a full-time job. I would do my 8 to 5 job, and then my business, my entrepreneurship would be a part-time, after hour and weekend thing. So those are few challenges that I had to face. But I was very fortunate that the small network that I had was very, 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 very effective. People like you, Ryan. I reached out to you when I first started my business, Phil Nation, Rob, and a small network of people that I grew up at the university, was part of the company from very beginning.
Well, thanks for sharing a bit about the background. I remember those early years very well. A few years later, I think we obviously we connected and interacted a little bit in computer science. I think, as a lot of computer science students do, I think at the time we were very analytical and kind of not a lot of not a lot of partying, even though St. Cloud State sometimes gets that reputation. We were kind of the nerds working in the labs. And so I think we got to know each other a lot more as we started to do business together. So flash forward to, the beginning of Field Nation and the early years. What was different? What did you learn from your first experience, and how did you go about supporting and scaling the early years of Field Nation?
So the the biggest learning from the first one is that never run out of cash. you know Cash is really important. And that's one area that the finance and accounting is one area that I enjoy all parts of the business. The finance and accounting was always a drag for me, and I always kind of wanted to avoid that. And and the biggest lesson is that, cash is the lifeblood, and you run out of that, you're dead. And I was literally dead. And so that is the biggest lesson there. Scaling up, starting Phil Nation. I'll tell you another good lesson for me. When I had my first job, I never had the confidence to go all in with my business. It was, partially, I never saw people around me to do successful. I mean, of course, I saw you guys, but not in my family. Growing up, business wasn't a thing that you do. It's the people who cannot have a job go start their own business. And so I grew up thinking, you go for good employment, something something safe. Um, so starting the business was always like, it's sort of my hobby. My friends and family would tease, it's my hobby. My old doesn't have anything else to do, so after hours and weekends, I just like you said, no partying, no life, no social life. And so what do? You just go do your second job. But what happened in 2008, I was laid off from eBureau. And I remember that long path, long drive back from St. Cloud to Plymouth. I was living in Plymouth at that time. And I just felt, rather than being scared, I was scared, but I felt more free. I felt like, great, there is no plan B anymore. It's just plan A, the only plan. Let's just make Phil Nation happen. And it was just absolutely freeing experience, because I was always trying to juggle the both. And if business, if it doesn't work, it's fine, I got another job. But the job that I have, that's really important, don't screw it up, I'm going to need that. And when I got laid off, it was like, no, there's no plan B, there's just one plan. Let's go all in and make it happen. That was really good. That worked for me.
It's really interesting you talk about the kind of the culture a little bit of starting a business and going all in. We both were classmates in the Department of Computer Science at St. Cloud State. And, I remember being called into the office by the department chair one day, Sarnath, who Dr. Ramnath, and, he asked me about my business. I thought he was calling in to reprimand me about something. And then all of a sudden I just decided, I'm opening up. I was going to talk about my work, in class and with faculty, and everything changed, at that point. And I remember when we met, you were talking about, we had been just a few years ahead of you in building what was Freeze.com and became NativeX. And, it was those relationships, in St. Cloud, we connected with a lecturer at Rob's entrepreneurship class, Brian Schoenborn, who connected us with somebody that had a lake home on his lake. Maybe you can share a little bit about the background of, I guess, I joined Field Nation a year before this gentleman as an advisor. When you reached out to me, we hadn't talked in a while. I didn't really know what you were working on, but it was similar, like maybe similar experience when I had with Sarnath. When you reached out to me, I was very interested and I was very much wanting to get involved. But until you opened up and kind of reached out, I never knew, really what you were up to. And even though I wasn't an investor in Eat Bureau, that you talked about, but maybe you could talk a little bit about that, getting, our angel investment and advising round together along with this gentleman, and how that impacted your early years.
Yeah, Ryan, I don't know if I if I told you this story. So I started the business in 2008, and few months into the business, I realized that I need, not only I need some investment, I need some people who knows, who can tell me what I don't know. And there was a lot of things that I didn't know. And literally I started searching my LinkedIn at that time. I'm like, I gotta find people that I know. It was a very, very small network, right? And I just, all of a sudden, I remember, like, I do have a rich friend. It's Ryan and Rob. Let's let's see, let's ping them and see if they. if they want to meet with me. And you were very gracious to meet with me. I remember us having lunch, and I was telling you, what I'm doing and stuff like that, and you were giving me advice, and we decided to stay in touch because I think you liked something that I was doing, and we decided to stay in touch. And I think we and since our kind of the first meeting outside the school, we probably talked probably for a few months, maybe 6 months. And then I said, look, I'm now ready to take some angel investment. Although my company didn't have a lot of overhead, I was always very resourceful in terms of doing stuff. So company was generating income and stuff like that, but company was growing without a balance sheet. There's no money in the balance sheet, but the revenue and all that stuff started to flow, and it just made me really uncomfortable. I kept the nightmare of cash flow from my previous company kept coming back. I said, I need to get some cash in the bank. And so I reached out to you, and you were interested, and quickly you introduced me with Young Son. And Young, I think you were talking about Young,
Yep.
who has a lake home at in St. John's, and he got interested in Phil Nation, and you both decided to invest. That was my first investment into the company. That was probably back in 2009, and you guys invested, and also you decided to stay involved with the company. And time to time, I'll just call you up and say, "Here's what I'm thinking, and I need people in this key roles." And you were very, gracious to help me connect with a lot of people, and a lot of people are still with Phil Nation. The people that you introduced me early days.
Hmm. Yeah, for everyone listening, that Young Son was a early connection that we made through his Watab home near St. John's. Young was CEO of a tech company called Oak Technologies and lived in the same neighborhood with Steve Jobs. But we just were very fortunate that somebody in the community, Brian Schomborn, introduced us early on, and Young served as a mentor to Rob and my business, Freeze.com. And when we began our family office angel investing, we tried to model our behavior off of Young, and Young brought his friend in, Pradeep Madan, who's the third partner in our current venture fund, Great North Labs. So we tried to, when we angel invested, we tried to lean in and provide any support and guidance we could, just like we were receiving from our Silicon Valley friends, thanks to Brian. But those years, I remember everything is just flashing back in front of me as you talk about this time period, because at the time, we didn't have a lot of active angel investors in many funds in Minnesota, if any, that were doing this seed stage or pre-seed stage investing. And I think we were so we've always looked for people that can execute, and we love to find entrepreneurs like Mynul. You were working on your business, and clearly you had some traction, yet you had to learn, you had some hard times in the early years, and had to recover. But maybe can you talk about how, and I also remember when we gave you the money, I thought you were going to spend it, but it seemed like it never left your bank account. So that was, maybe that gave you more confidence with scaling. But I'm really interested to hear more about, when did you feel like things were really starting to hum, and what were some of the major milestones as you began growing after that period?
I don't know if I can tell you one major milestone, kind of breakthrough moment for us, but well, I do have one and that I always like to share, which is I was so naive when I started. I thought, you build a product and you do some Google AdWords and stuff like that, and all of a sudden things gonna just everybody start to sign up, and you know I was so naive, and I waited and waited, for a few months, and there was literally nothing. And I don't know if this was a problem with my business model or what. And then I think towards end of 2008, we had one customer sign up, just all by, there was no sales effort. Somebody signed up, one company signed up and did 20 work orders on our platform. Our platform is mostly work order driven. Like somebody create a work order and then they find a technician and deploy the technician in the field. That's kind of how the system works. And by end of 2008, I waited 6 months, and then end of 2008, Somebody signed up, created 20 work orders, found 20 technician nation, distributed all over the nation. And I got so excited. I thought, this is it. This is the moment that tells that I'm on the right path. Now, looking back, last year we did a million work order. You can see that the scale of the company is very different, but there is nothing more meaningful to me than that first 20 work orders. Just that was the lifeline for me. That just gave me this desperate validation that I needed, in those early days, that it is the right. I'm working on the right problem, and people find value through my product. And that then it was a question of, the how do I figure out the sales and distribution and all that kind of stuff, which is an ongoing process. It never ends. We still have the same discussion that we had 12 years ago. But that 20 work order was so sweet memory in my mind. I still, if anybody asks me what's a breakthrough, that was the breakthrough. I don't know if that didn't happen and I didn't see any work order coming for a few more months, I may just, shut down and say, it's not worth doing. I don't know. I don't know what would have happened, but that was really big.
Yeah, it seemed like, I just remember observing, and it seemed like, you had some very large enterprise customer interests, and part of the, I think, building that confidence, like you could see it, with every order almost in every meeting we had, and during the scale up, and it seemed like the conversations, or the types of companies and the traction you were seeing continued to increase as your confidence built, and kind of, I think more and more people believed in Field Nation, and it was a competitive space, while you were starting, wasn't it, Mynul?
It was a competitive space. We had, very well-funded competitors, and we did things very differently. Not having money, I say, one of the best thing is that don't start with too much money. I mean, you need some money, so you're not running out of cash. That's a different problem. But too much money could be the same problem. It could be a bigger problem because you're wasting someone else's money without knowing whether you have the right product or you have the right distribution, whatnot. And I've seen some of my competitors made that mistake of raising too much. I mean, the promise of a Uber like model, right now you see everything is becoming Uberized, right? It's Uber of this and Uber of that, delivery and
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know uh, hotels, and everything is Uberized. And when we started in 2008, this idea of getting on demand workers to go do something was new. People would, investors are very bullish back then as they are now. And so a lot of my competitors got raised a lot of money, and they tried to scale quickly without figuring out the market maturity and all that kind of stuff, and wasn't very successful.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I would say, the timing matters, right? So when we started, people would compare us, Phil Nation, as the Craigslist. They would say,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, you are like Craigslist. We are not. We, ABC company. We're enterprise. We don't deal with Craigslist, right?" And now it changed so much. It seems like everybody is more comfortable staying at Airbnb and riding an Uber. It's the new normal. Like, of course, uh, you get something on demand. That's the way it
Mm-hmm.
works. It's whether it's a cloud on demand, or whether it's a technician on demand, or a driver on demand. It's everything
Mm-hmm.
on demand.
That's maybe a great kind of topic to follow a little bit. I know you went a long time before raising, any larger financing, and I remember working with young. Everybody's now the chief strategy officer at Samsung. He's been there for 6 years, so quite an amazing journey, for the people involved and associated. But at that time, going into that big financing, do you want to talk about, after you scaled for some time, you were in a position of strength, but what were you thinking about, in terms of the next chapter as you prepared for, your later financing, if you could share a little bit about that?
Yeah, one thing we didn't want it to do is raise a lot of money too quickly, and because we were still we were figuring it out at that time, like what is the right market, what is the right customer, how do we scale them up, how do we scale our business and stuff like that. And there was, we just didn't want it to raise a lot of capital that comes with a constraint of build a 100 people sales team and sell. You gotta find, you gotta do the product market fit. You gotta figure out the distribution channel and stuff like that. And so we waited, and then we were adamant to find somebody who's genuinely passionate about the market we are in and the problem that we are trying to solve, and be patient like we are. We know that it's a slow maturing market. For us, it's a slow maturing market. It is still taking a long time for us to see the market maturity, because we are working with enterprises, not consumers. It doesn't turn
Yeah.
like the way you see GameStop is turning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Enterprises move in a different pace. So we wanted to make sure that our investors are patient. They will stay with us and not have that undue burden that do something
Hmm.
because we got an exit. We got to figure out an exit in next year or something like that.
Hmm.
So when we raised our capital, that was end of 2015. By that time, we were on in 500 multiple times, Fast 50. And so there was a lot of calls we were getting. A lot of VC and private equities are coming from East and West Coast. Unfortunately, there wasn't anybody from the Midwest at that time. But I remember our CFO and we met 70 some VCs at that time as part of the interview process. And then we finally found someone, a company, private equity called Susquehanna Growth Equity. We immediately liked those guys because of their flexibility in the capital, and then the life, the the time horizon they have. They literally don't have time horizon. If they like a business, they hold it, and they can have subsequent rounds and stuff like that. And so we decided to raise capital at that time, end of
Yeah.
2015.
I remember always hearing you say that, this is the startup you see yourself working on forever, and it's been, I never thought I never thought it would become forever, but you still have the same excitement and patience, it seems, and continue to grow. And it's been exciting, following your journey. Maybe we could kind of shift gears and talk a little bit more about the broader kind of gig economy, and, when we started the fund with experience investing in these gig-like services quite a bit as angel investors. We've done SaaS and marketplace businesses, consumer and enterprise, as a fund. But we were excited to when starting the fund to get a group of operators as advisors of scaled tech companies, including yourself. So having then seeing in the portfolio, we start seeing a wide variety of people working on Uber-like services for other markets, and including one that you helped with diligence on early. I remember it was just so amazing to see this founder, Patrick O'Reilly at Factory Fix, requests a meeting with our fund, and in his deck, as he's going through it, he says the comps he was highlighting was Field Nation as a major success. I was like, yeah, that's my buddy Mynul from college. He's like, what? He's like, yeah. And I asked him if you mind if Mynul gets involved in reviewing this deal with us, and he said, oh, sure, of course. But and that's your perspective as an operator scaling a gig like service and seeing different strategies play out has been invaluable, in supporting our evaluation of such opportunities as Factory Fix. But do you want to talk a little bit about, what you see as some of the different strategies and that are working or not working with these types of services?
With kind of gig economy kind of business
Yeah,
model.
what challenges and what seems to be what are some of the key takeaways you see from people that have been successful and not successful, and how does it vary by market?
Yeah, I think the on the consumer front, gig platforms are really, really successful. I think the laggers are the enterprises. Unfortunately, we are in that group, the enterprise group. But that's catching up. Usually, that's always the case. People in their personal life will experience something, and then they'll think about, how does it apply in their businesses and stuff like that. So, there's a lot of, kind of a consumer centric gig platforms, from Uber and Airbnb to, Grubhub, to everything else that you can think of. But the next frontier is that the enterprises are thinking, how can I reduce my capex and opex and make it more variable, right? I mean, and if you remember, Ryan, 2008 was a great recession.
Yeah.
It was good. I mean, it was good for us to start at that time because everybody was thinking outside the box. Like, what, any financial crisis kind of creates that sense of thinking outside the box. Like, we got to change, right? The status quo is not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
So 2008, we saw lot of SMBs, was whether because of their need for survival or whatnot, they were thinking outside the box, and we saw great adoption, since 2009 till many years. And what we are seeing is that this crisis, the crisis we are in, the pandemic crisis, it's shaking up the enterprises, and
Mm-hmm.
they're thinking like, okay, we got to think outside the box in terms of uh, you know variable labor. And that's the next wave in the I'm talking more specifically about the labor platforms like Field Nation
Yeah.
and others. And they're much more comfortable in their understanding of the labor model. It does has its challenge, though. And the biggest challenge is the worker classification. In this country, there is literally two classification, and none really fit well with the gig workers. We have the W-2 model, the full-time employees, and you have the independent contractor model. And the challenge is that you know uh, some states are trying to push gig workers to be classified as employees. You probably heard, AB 5, Assembly Bill 5,
Mm-hmm.
by from California. Although I think there is a proposition um, that got passed last November, that AB 5 didn't go through ultimately. But AB 5 would have made every gig worker employee. But that's not gig workers want. They don't want to be employees. They want the number one thing the gig workers really enjoy is the flexibility, and employment. Full-time employment doesn't give that. So there needs to be a new type of legislation to accommodate for this new class of workers. And they do need some safety, they need benefits, they need fair treatment. Um, but that's the making everybody a full-time W-2 is not the solution. So we think that we will see some legislative changes in next few years. Hopefully will be a more common sense approach than, say, move everybody, make them everybody W-2.
Yeah.
That's not a solution.
Yeah, it seems that regulations are struggling to keep up with the pace of technology, and this is
For
a
sure.
shining example of that.
So, Mynul, Joseph here. You went through a lot with the immigration process. What do you think of the current regulatory environment on immigration? Do you have any solutions or suggestions given your experience?
Yeah, it's also a very sensitive topic, isn't it? I think we need to have a common sense approach to immigration. It's People try to make it a binary problem. Nothing is a binary problem. It's way complicated than this, right? And look, I can tell you that a smarter approach would be looking at industry by industry, and look at what kind of workers we need. This country needs high skilled workers to no skilled workers. I mean, it needs everything in between. And but there is no there is no systematic approach to address that problem. It becomes a very slogan type of approach, rather than, you know, systematic market based. I would make it a market based approach. What is very difficult for me to get my head around is that, think about some of my friends who went to St. Cloud State. We got institution because the taxpayers, the Minnesota taxpayers, paid for our some of our tuition, right? And that was a great help. Many couldn't stay in this country because of the complexity of immigration. Guess what? Some of them went back to India and other parts of the world, and working for Google and Microsoft of the world, and paying taxes in those countries. And so there's a vicious loop for US and a virtuous loop for other countries, meaning if the US companies cannot find talent here, they're going to go wherever the talent is, whether it's in other part of the world. And the talents, if they cannot stay here, guess what? They're going to go somewhere else. And the companies will follow the talents, and those talents will, pay taxes and enrich their community and stuff like that. So, market driven approach would be my approach, my recommendation.
When it comes to entrepreneurial talent, what's the difference in skill sets from like someone just starting out, from the startup mentality to the growth mentality?
Well, I think that the differences are enormous. When you're starting up a business, you are a missionary, you are an inventor, you are just kind of you're hustling and you're trying to get the product out. You're the sales guy. You're doing everything that needs to be done to get going, right? When the companies start to scale, that's a lot of management and leadership. And sometimes, and I can tell you it's true for me, sometimes it's hard to get, you know not to be involved, but to lead and to manage and hold people accountable, find the right people, think about the organizational design rather than solving the specific customer problem, be on the every sales call, which I used to do. But now stepping back and say, no, you know we got to figure out how to scale the sales. I used to be in every product decision, but rather now, how do you design an organization? The organization can design the product. So I still like to be missionary, but missionary in terms of the mission of the company, not just doing everything and as you do when you're startup founder in the very beginning stage of the company. So skills are very different, and I can also tell you it may not be right for everybody. What you like in the earliest stage is, as a company start to scale, those things are not there anymore in the company, and you may not like the new company. And if you try to you know hold on to those old things, the things that you really enjoyed, you may be holding back the company to scale up. That is not good for the founder, not good for the company.
For founders who are starting to scale up, maybe they're not ready for investors yet. Do you have any advice, or can you share your experience on creating an advisory group?
Absolutely. I think the advisory group could be very helpful. And some of the things to think about from the advisory standpoint, we have advisors that are more technical focused, because that's one area we wanted to make sure that we know how to scale the technology stack of our company. We have an advisor that comes from the domain expertise from our industry. And I personally have a CEO coach. A couple of years ago, I decided, how do I know? I read a lot to see, because I always feel every year, I feel like I'm probably not ready to be the CEO of this new company, because as the company grows, the complexity grows, and I never been there. I never been there in that new company CEO, the new stage of the company. But then a few years ago, I realized that having a live conversation with somebody who been there, done that, it's an amazing thing. So I do have a CEO coach, and he's awesome, and and I think a lot of time you hear the comment that, you know, the it's very lonely at the top. Lot and and having somebody that can be a sounding board, and you can just be open up and vulnerable and tell everything, all the stupid questions. It could be very uh, freeing experience, and especially if you can talk to somebody who's done that, they can guide you in the right direction and say the thing that you're worried about, that's really not a thing you should be worried about.
When you guys think of the people, systems, and process of scaling and evolving your leadership, like you were just talking about, Mynul, what keeps you awake at night?
What keeps me awake at night? If you asked me that question last April, that would have been a different answer, because I was really worried, as everything started to shut down, uh, not knowing, where the market is going in a shutdown economy. But we recovered pretty well from that crisis, and we're off to a really good start for 2021. It's a rhetorical question, but I don't, I sleep pretty well at night. But in 2021, one of our key goal, scaling one part of our market segment, and in any given year we pick one or two areas. Last year was, we created 5 different product packages. That was transformative for our company. It actually took us 24 months to get those packages out the door, and implement and then roll it out. That was one thing on always on top of my mind. So now that's all done. That's now part of our muscle. And so every year we pick one or two things that are kind of transformative, for the company, for either the product or our market, or our organization as a whole, how we do it. And I try to focus my time in those couple of areas that are kind of still new, where we're trying to build that capability, the muscle, because it does require a lot of focus. Ryan, anything you want to add?
Yeah, it's really interesting. People, systems, and process. I think about all three on a day-to-day basis, but probably the one that keeps me up at night is really people. I think, we're a lot of these companies that we're investing in, and their business models check out strategically. They look good. They've got some early wins and victories with customers, but these organizations, the type of people and the way they need to evolve, the people that exist at the company, and the people they need to bring on, it's the biggest challenge I think that all of these companies face, more than a strategic or process challenge. I think that at different stages, if you don't keep up with the system or the process, that'll bite you. But usually if you can get just a little bit of the right people in on the bus at the right stage, you can do it. And you know, I've I have seen, there's always outliers, right? Like there's a portfolio company, I won't name any names or anything, but they, sometimes the process that the board or advisors want to put in, having not really been operators at different stages, they think about it like, oh, we need to operate like this is a 200-person company, when it's two people. And the way they're conducting board meetings, I'm just shaking my head, like, and I'm usually empathetic to the founder and trying to, like, hold on, that maybe this is a little much here, guys. Let's give them, let's like push back. Let's like relax a little bit on the process. Let's just, take it one step at a time. But I think people, but I think it's not just the management teams. It is that advisory group and that an extended network. It goes all the way around. And I think, it's really easy. A lot of founders want to be, want to succeed and have the drive. But if they don't get the right, advisors and team together, it's just not going to happen.
So now that it has happened for you with Field Nation, Mynul, what does your family say about your hobby now?
Oh, life is more normal now. I don't have two jobs, so, and we have two boys, and, we spend plenty of time, with the boys, and it was fun. And I think you need a lot of energy, and the sooner in your life you have the energy and you get some of those crazy entrepreneurial stuff done early in life, is probably good idea.
running up against time here, and I just want to say thank you for your friendship and for sharing this journey together. It's been amazing, and appreciate you being one of our first guests.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mynul, for joining us today on Execution is King.